When is it beneficial to be positive versus beneficial to be negative? i.e., when is it helpful for our well-being and our reality to focus on what is good, nourishing, etc., and when is it not? This has been one of my more perplexing problems as someone who grew up with success with a positive mental attitude as one of the first books I read in my teens, and continued in lots of self-help and selling and business books, which almost exclusively teach the attitude, the mentality of thinking about what's positive and being, turning lemons into lemonade, etc. So, at what point when one's life is falling apart in a crisis does it become more helpful to look at the negative? And the first thing I want to bring into this discussion is something that I learned from Bill Gates in one of his biographies, which was the mania of anxiety that drove him to preempt a variety of problems at Microsoft. And the summary of that whole biography would be Bill constantly imagining, looking at the worst case scenario, how all kinds, how most businesses fail, for one, how most startups fail, how big companies get taken over almost constantly, and that this could happen anytime to Microsoft. And so what did he do? He's always maintained, like Microsoft has had up to $30 billion in cash, so a big cash war chest. 2, always expecting the worst. And 3, working like hell to see that the worst didn't happen. Now, there's some research done on what is, this has been given a name, it's called constructive pessimism. And constructive pessimism is imagine the worst, expect the worst, work like hell to see that it doesn't happen, and aim for the best. So that's constructive pessimism. In order to do that, you've got to be constantly aware of everything that could go wrong and is going wrong. You've got to be anxious and upset enough about it to do something about it. And then you've got to do that thing, work like hell, to see that that doesn't happen. And so this was the foundation for Microsoft's sustained success, was Bill's constructive pessimism. So it's the exact opposite of Norman Vincent Peale's success with a positive mental attitude. And so I have tended to combine both in my life. For example, my landscape contract has a few sentences to a few paragraphs that preclude just about every bad thing that I've ever seen happen, or that I can imagine happening, or that's happened to me. And the language in my contracts is designed to prevent that. So, for example, one of the things I encounter, the wife comes out and says, Dane, I want you to do this in our design. I say, okay, I do it. And the husband says, I never approved that. Why wasn't I included? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Why didn't your wife include you if you wanted to be included? Or, don't you guys talk to each other? Apparently not. But I take the hit because I'm the fall guy, meaning they're not going to get a divorce. They're going to fire the landscaper because I'm less important than their relationship. So what's the line in the contract that deals with that? It is assumed that both people in the relationship have the authority to make and request decisions unless specified here. And it is the responsibility of the couple to communicate with one another, not the contractor's responsibility. Otherwise, note it here that only one person has binding authority. That takes care of it. That's the worst that could happen in that area. So that's the few sentences there. What's the worst case over here? What's the worst case? And as a result, I've never had a lawsuit in 25 years. So what's the exact opposite? People are great, people are wonderful, nothing's going to go wrong, so we don't even need a contract. I learned that on my first job when I did an entire design at $7 an hour, which was when I started out 25 years ago. That's what I charged when I was 17, $7 an hour for design. It was a great design. The client said, thank you very much. I'll think about it. She thought about it. She said, I'm going to do half of your design, but I'm not going to do all of it. So I'm not going to pay you anything. And this was my lesson. So I would say the only time I've got stiffed on a design in my entire life was when I was positive and thought people are great, people are ethical and all that. And so I don't even need a contract. We agreed on $7 an hour. That should be it. I mean, what could be more simple than that? I spent 6 hours on this, pay me my $50-$60. I now, that's the only time I've been stiffed. And because of a clear contract, people pay me hundreds of dollars an hour. And they're grateful, and they pay up, And so this is kind of the thing in business. Well, with this whole terrain of PTSD, what do I focus on? I've been wronged. It's not fair. First the whole wave of stuff with my parents, but then recently, an organization that's, dedicated to all this stuff and has no contracts and anything. They're really, really reactivated and hurt me more than any other person or group of people have hurt me in my whole adult life. And I was paying them to be of service. And, it cost me $100,000. It brought me to the edge of, rage. It brought me to the edge of insanity. It brought me to the edge of violence. It brought me to the edge of emotions that were so big I didn't know how I could even look at them. They're just so intense. 5 times bigger. It's like, this is so wrong. And this is a public organization. People need to know. And they're in complete denial. So what do I do? And so there was so much, to just obsess about every little nuance of wrongness and how it all formed this big synergy that threatened to just implode my life socially, emotionally, health, financially, physically. And I can't get over it. And so I'm going back like, I just see how they did another thing wrong. Now I get it, and now I just realized they did this wrong. And the cowards haven't owned up to this, and they haven't done this, and and I could take them to court, and so there's this whole obsession with making sense of all that's gone on here. And it's all painful, and it's all negative, and it's all lonely, and it's all just miserable. And some part of my mind doesn't feel safe until I've figured it all out. And so, I wrote a 1,200-page book. But while this is happening, I'm going through pain. So I'm now a year later, and my mind still drifts like, how could they have said this? And maybe I should do this. And if I did that, would that convince them, so they could have the guts to apologize to, or should I still sue them? Or should, do this and do that? And it's anger, it's hurt, it's fear, it's terror, it's uncertainty, it's rage, it's pain, it's loneliness. It's miserable. On the other hand, I can be positive. I've got this wonderful sweetheart. I have, my business is, going well. My body seems to have turned the corner from going downhill to at least stabilizing. And some days there are some up days. And I have new dreams and new goals. And so I'm now kind of in this point where it can go either way, where I've got some control and I still have regular waves, including this video, where like I would put this video in largely negative category, meaning I'm dwelling on my PTSD rather than, the thing that made me the most happy today. Like I could be talking with my sweetheart instead of making this video. And so which is it? Call my sweetheart and have part of my mind going back like I want people to get this. I want people to understand what, I don't know. What's the algorithm of deciding in this terrain? And I guess what I'm wanting to say is there's a loneliness in a culture that basically in various ways is so allergic to intense pain and loneliness and trauma and all of that, that combined with the whole self-help ethic, which doesn't like to look at the complexity of, well, exactly how did one of the most powerful companies in the world get built by frenetic, controlling, panicked negativism. Like Bill was quite frenetic, and he'd be so anxious that Microsoft might fail, and he'd drive his coders so that some of them had nervous breakdowns, some of them went insane, some of them committed suicide because he's so anxious and come on, work harder, I could do that in a weekend, get on and move on. But he's driven by this fear of all that could go wrong, and it could. And that drive to look at the reality of all that could go wrong and get ahead of it allowed him to succeed. In my own life, not to the same extent. I have no big empire ambitions, but to the same degree, the way I see, okay, if this isn't done in this way, and this way, this contract could sour. So come on, hurry up, do this, now do this, don't leave litter there. Shut the door so the dog doesn't escape. Do this. I'm constantly mapping out everything that could go wrong and then seeing that it doesn't. And then having happy clients. And it's nerve-wracking. It's hard on my body. It's hard on my crew. But it works. And, it's not terribly fun to be in that state, but it's much funner than to be in these quagmire mesh where all kinds of things are going wrong because you didn't preclude them and you're just stuck there and there's no way out. It's just a mess of one mistake after another. And so I'm pretty successful at avoiding that by empathy, by implementing Gates's strategy, but to a much smaller degree, so it's not quite so hard on my body. Because I've had PTSD to varying degrees my whole life, I can't take that much more stress. So when to be negative and work like hell to be positive. When to dwell on the negative in order to learn more about it. Like that's what I'm doing right now. I'm dwelling on the negative to learn more about it. Will I learn something in this video? Will you? And when to be positive. Now, too much negative energy, when you're sick and depressed and tired, it doesn't matter whether it's effective or not. You're going to collapse. Too much. So that's one of the learning curves here. It's like, you know, I ran into my body's limit to hold all this, and I just had to focus on the positive. In other words, no contact with this group, no, you know, nothing. Go on 7 months of vacation and just focus on doing everything I possibly could, of course, but my mind is going back. Like I've made 100 PTSD videos in the last couple of months with all the stuff that no one wants to hear, but that I need to say to feel sane. And so what's the balance? And so the short answer is, in this terrain, I don't know. Other parts of that answer is, I think it's a really important thing to weigh. A client surprised me today with several waves of, like, I didn't do that negativism enough with her. I was positive with her. You know, I went along to more than normal with a client to her, like, oh, it's wonderful, I love you, it's all gonna work out, let's just get a move on. And it's like, okay, let's get a move on. And then, why didn't you do that? Well, you didn't ask me to do that. Well, isn't it your job as a professional? It's like, well, you said this was all loving and gonna work, you know, work out. So I kind of went along with that. And there's no objective right or wrong here. We just didn't slow down to spell this out. And now you're surprising me with some very direct, clear expectations you didn't make clear. Nor did you indicate that you were this picky person. You indicated you were this flowing, wonderful person. So, you know, so I'm then dealing with that. So this is where being negative in advance and preempting that, like I could have written a tighter contract with her and it would have helped me right now, but I was too positive. And in, you know, and because I've had strong feelings of wanting to die around this terrain, you know, it's really important not to be in denial. That's the other balance. Like, how much of being positive is being in denial, and how much is being constructive. So the way I'm coming down right now is, anytime like I get an idea like this, that it feels like there's some companionship, like just putting it out there, I feel like there's, you know, maybe 5% of the people watching this will get it and be able to understand me, and then I don't feel so alone, so that reduces that. I also feel like there's probably plenty of people who are in this terrain, and the thought of helping them know they're not alone is good. I have a witness, like there's no one I can talk to in this moment except you. But I'm also talking to myself in this. You know, I'm talking myself through it and seeing if I can learn something. So I'm showing up a little bit more for myself, and this camera format helps with that because I'm looking right at my face, and I'm listening to what I'm saying, and I'm cross-referencing, and it's holding my attention on the topic to see if I can learn anything. So that helps. And But there's a cost. There is a cost. Meaning I've made several hours of video today on various things, including this topic. And I've had disgruntled people who I'm not giving enough attention to in the present because I'm dwelling on this in the past, because it affected me so much. It almost ruined my life. So I feel like it's important to understand and show respect. It's also important to inject into this culture that's so intent on moving on that it doesn't understand things. Like, what if, rather than having this bulletproof contract that I've developed over 25 years, what if every time something had gone wrong, I just said, okay, let's move on, rather than why did that happen? What would have had to be in the contract to not move on? It's, if you want to learn something from pain, and that leads me to the next question: when to avoid an entire relationship and situation so that you don't have to deal with it, and when to assume it's probably going to come around again. So let's hang in there a little bit to figure out how to do it better so that next time, another group abuses me, which who knows when that will be, I'll be ready for it and not feel like I'm now running from groups because I ran from this one. I didn't analyze it because it was too overwhelming and scary and painful. And now I'm just running away from groups for my whole life because that could happen at any time and I don't have the confidence to face it. Whereas at the end of all this, at the end of 100 videos and 1,200 pages and this, I feel pretty ready to preclude that kind of thing happening again. I feel more confident to have learned enough. And I also feel like I have some skill in leadership in this arena, and I want to contribute that because I know how painful it is. So I want to help other people avoid it. So that's kind of the mix. I don't have a clear answer, but I would say on the one hand, if your body just can't take the negative, you got to run to keep your body in health. If your depression and desire to die is so strong and just looking at anything negative is too painful, run like hell until you get it up again. But if you're successful in boosting your energy and boosting your, courage, your confidence, your love, your hope for the future, and you find yourself now looking back, like what went wrong there? What is it? Write about it. Express it. Learn about it. If it gets too overwhelming, come back to the positive. Invite in the new energy. Invite stuff. And that's the balance that I'm trying to find. And I get obsessed because that's part of the PTSD/Asperger's kind of narrowband focus. Like once I get into it, I want to go, and I don't have the reserves to kind of go a whole week into negative energy until I'm done. I've got to do it until I can't do another video right now. I'm going to burn out. So I'd love to continue that train of thought, but I'm going to pause it and I'm going to turn to something really positive. I'm going to eat a good meal. I'm going to watch a fun movie. I'm going to talk to my sweetheart. And I'm going to trust that negative topic will be there waiting for me when I want to turn my attention to it again. So those are my mullings around this topic for today. And that's the best answer that I can come up with. And hopefully it helps you a little bit with your balancing act.